Hi, this is Dr. Kametz from the Gohl Clinic of Chiropractic here. And I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming school year because we're at the beginning of the school year right now, and the germ theory keeps getting reinforced over and over in the schools. And even in California right now, you can no longer have a personal belief exemption to not vaccinate your child. So all over the schools we find antibacterial soap, antibacterial mists. And I want to clear up a misconception here because it's not that other children are a breeding ground for infections in school. It's the atmosphere that's set up by the government administrators that has really caused this. If you don't believe me, just look at a hospital here. If we take 10 kids and we put them in a room where one kid's sick and he had contact with them, and he was coughing on them and spitting on them, would every one of the 10 kids get sick? And very clearly the answer here is no. Well, how can that possibly be if they're all breathing the same air, they're swapping the same spit? If that all contained the bacteria and the viruses, how come not every kid was sick? And it's because there has to be another factor here, and it's really the internal factor of the individual. Some children have a stronger immune system and they're better able to fight off infections, and they won't even develop an infection. And while some children will just get sick at everything that comes along. So instead of trying to control the environment with vaccines and antibacterial elements, the same thing that the hospitals do, that they've created these superbugs there, why not work on the internal resistance of the individual? Because ultimately it's the body's own internal resistance that determines whether you develop symptoms or your body fights it off. And how do you do that? How can you improve on something that nature perfected? You can't. You got to get out of the way. If you're taking antibiotics to kill off an infection, what does that do to increase the strength of your immune system? Does it make it stronger or weaker? And very clearly, it makes it weaker, and this is, you can't outsmart a natural law here. For instance, if I'm weightlifting and I can bench press 100 pounds for 10 reps, and at the 9th rep, the first sign of resistance, at the 9th rep, my lifting partner goes there and yanks off the weight, what does that do to get me any stronger? You really need to push to something that you can't do to get stronger. And this is a natural law in everything. Even Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, said that people only succeed into the proportion in which they failed. And it's a natural law. And going back to vaccines here, vaccines take all the credit for stopping infectious disease over the years, but clearly it hasn't because it's still going on. And really what really deserves the credit for stopping infectious disease or being able to deal with it is two things. Is number one, the innate intelligence of the body is the first and most important thing. And secondly, plumbers. They're the ones that deserve all the credit for decreasing the amount of infectious disease. Before sewers, sanitation in where they'd have the plague, it was awful. People would throw fecal material in the streets. And this is one of the reasons why places in Africa get hit with one of these, with so much of these superbugs there, is because it's a non-sanitary environment. But even long before vaccines and plumbing, people were still, that had immune systems that were very strong, they were still able to survive plagues throughout the years. So it has nothing to do with the vaccines. As a matter of fact, by polluting the environment with more vaccines and more antibiotics, the medical practice has just created a breeding ground for these superbugs to survive in. And they can pass along the resistance from generation to generation. Because remember, bacteria and viruses, they also have an internal wisdom inside them, and they can also adapt. And the ones that are strong enough to make it through the antibiotic tax, or they're the ones that develop a resistance. Or the virus just simply creates a new strand of virus that no vaccine can ever defend against. They're smart too. So we're always going to be behind the 8 ball trying to beat these things. So it's really only the body's own internal resistance that determines if you're going to develop an infection, not the environment. How do you improve the body's own internal resistance? You can't improve nature. You can only get it away. And this is really the sole mission of chiropractic. It's to remove the interference to the innate intelligence to the body to allow a better expression of life. Now, just thinking physiologically and anatomically, life is only transmitted through the nerves. What is life? It's abstract, it's spiritual, it can't be measured, but clearly we know the difference between someone with all their parts that's dead and someone with all their parts that's alive. It's life. And we know life knows exactly how, when, how much, where an organ is supposed to function with infinite intelligence compared to man's minute understanding. And we know that life is transmitted over the nerves because if you cut a nerve or you damage the brainstem, life is going to either leave the organ or the body respectively. If we're looking for a bone out of place, a misalignment, putting pressure on the nerve and causing interference to the flow of life, the innate intelligence of the body will eventually not function up to its potential. And chiropractors call this condition a subluxation. And what happens is that when you have enough cells that are malfunctioning because of limited lack of this life flowing from the brainstem to the body and to the brain, eventually you reach a point where enough cells malfunction. And when enough cells malfunction, the body is going to not be able to live up or work at its potential. And you have a weak body, you have a weak immune system. So the job of the chiropractor is to come along and adjust that interference, unblock that interference with an adjustment, restore the flow of life from the brainstem to the body and to the brain. And now the cells have the potential for normal function and the body can work better. It's really as simple as that, and it's really as logical as that. So you go to a chiropractor to help your body function at a better level so that you can reach your innate potential. You will never reach your innate potential, your God-given potential, by cutting organs out of you or by putting poisonous drugs in the body. It will never ever happen. I had a little girl in the office. I'm going to post what she said below. But she was 10 years old when she came into the office, and she had something ridiculous, like 60 absentee visits a year. It was really, really bad. And this was before getting checked by a chiropractor. And it was really sad socially for this girl because her mom would tell me that she would go to school and then she'd have a major absence. And then by the time she got back to school, 60 days a year, her friends would forget her. So it was a major social issue for her too. And she started getting adjusted, and with roughly 2 months, she went on a perfect attendance streak. I think this year, she was absent, I'm going to say under 5 days, but I really think it's more like she was absent 2 days this entire year. I said 60 to 0 because I liked cars. But anyway, massive changes. I'm going to post the changes below here. It's pretty incredible. The potentialist function is so great when the brain stem is connected to the brain and to the body. And instead of thinking what disease you have and how do you treat it with an antibiotic or a vaccine and try to outsmart nature, the logical thing is to think of what can I get my body to do to function at its potential so it develops its own internal resistance. And chiropractic is the only thing that can offer the body to function at a higher potential. I love and appreciate you. See everything below.